Okay, so this is, for those following along online, this is the Town of Fairfield's Fair Rent Commission meeting of Thursday, May 16th. We're meeting in the Old Town Hall Conference Room as well as via Zoom. We do have a quorum, so it's 7:01 p.m. And with that, I'll turn things over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barnard. If you were not at our last meeting, my name is Tom Lambert. I was elected chair of the Fair Rent Commission at our last meeting. And I think since we have some new folks who are here, maybe it would make sense to go around the table again so you can introduce yourselves.
Sure. Ahmed Ibrahim, was honored to be elected to this commission. I missed the first meeting. I'm sorry about that. I work in Fairfield U. That's my full-time job. I like car. I'm also CPA. I have my own practice. I think I'm here to represent the quote-unquote landlords. So I am part of a group that own real estate in Connecticut and in the town. So hopefully I will be a good voice for the landlords.
Carl, you want to go next?
Sure, no problem. Hi, everyone. My name is Carl Iskadegi. As I work at Fairfield University as our associate director in the Office of Student Diversity and Multicultural Affairs. So I have the fun job on campus overseeing diversity programming, affinity clubs, LGBTQ initiatives, as well as anything my director tells me to do. But I am a homeowner in the town of Fairfield. I grew up in the town, so I went to middle and high school here. And then decided to come back after college. So great to be back. Great to see all of you. And if there's anything I can do from the student life side, let me know. But I know our students can sometimes be a handful.
James?
Sure. James or Jim, James Casey. I live on Burr Street, right across from Burr Elementary. I've worked in commercial construction and commercial real estate since the mid-'80s. And I've really been involved in all aspects of it, but certainly the leasing and management aspects of it. So I just felt like this would be an interesting commission to be a part of, and look forward to seeing where what goes on.
Hi, I'm Eileen Francis. I live in Fairfield, first time a tenant. So now I'm seeing that side of it, and I'll try to help any way I can.
And I'm Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development, Staff Support for the Fair Rent Commission. Jim and I know one another from Stratford days, so.
A couple decades ago.
Has been a long time.
Great. Well, I think that takes us to our next agenda item, which is to hear, consider, and approve the minutes of our last special meeting on April 25th. The minutes were provided with us from Mr. Barnhart. I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a second?
Second, Eileen Francis.
Okay, great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstained, was not here.
Great. All right, I think they are approved. Next agenda item number 4, to hear, consider, and act upon a 2024 meeting schedule, which is also provided for us as well too. I looked through these already. With the exception of my daughter's birthday on October 10th, I know I'm good for all these dates. But does anybody else have any known conflicts with any of these dates right now? Vacations or anything like that?
And this would only be, if circumstances dictated, you have a meeting, if there was business to be attended to. But I think it's helpful to have a meeting schedule so that we don't have to try to always figure out who's around for these types of things.
So
I'm fine with all of that. I just want to bring to your attention that June 11 is not Thursday. I think it's June 13.
Mistake.
unless June 11th was intentional, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was maybe tied to a complaint received.
No, I think I just made a typo.
Okay.
Because it looks like July 11th, so it should be June 13th. Thank you.
What is the date, Mark?
13th.
June 13th.
13th?
Did anyone else notice anything skewed here? Like everything else.
Well, in that case, I do have a conflict with June 13th,
Okay.
but we can have an alternate sit in for me, I suppose.
Well, we could also, it's possible we may have a hearing that date.
Okay.
So, if we want, we could have it on I know we say we're gonna do it the second Thursday, but there's no magic to it. We get to say the third Thursday if that works, the 20th, or even, I think that we would need to give enough time to notify the parties of the hearing date.
Right. The 20th works for me. It works for everybody
Works
else.
for me. June
Is that okay?
20th.
Correct.
So
All right.
everything's the second Thursday with the exception of June, which will be the third Thursday.
All right. Well, I might as well just make, I guess, a motion to amend the proposed hearing schedule from June 11th to June 20th. Do I have a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so adopted, and the rest of the schedule looks like it works well for everybody else, so we can move to approve the meeting schedule as amended. I'll make that motion. Does anybody have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that is approved as well.
Okay, well, that's the.
Just have one question. So do you always have Zoom attendance as an option?
We do.
So, yeah, I mean, if something pops up, I can usually get to connection. So I think the dates, I just, one day I'm traveling, but I'm, probably will be where I'm gonna be by 7 and it could dial in. So,
Perfect.
okay.
One of the more positive things that came out of the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I'll take that.
I really do think it jump-started certain office technologies by like probably 5 or 10 years.
I know I have a baseball game. I just thought a Yankee game on June 20th.
Oh, you're gonna see the Orioles play, huh?
Is that? The teachers in town are going and someone invited me as their guest.
Well,
A discount. Is that, I could Zoom?
You could,
could Zoom.
you could.
Because it's going to be over by then.
Okay.
I'll be sitting someplace in New York, but Zooming, all right, if it comes to that.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that's the story. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. So item number.
Apologies, my tardiness.
Oh, yeah.
Doug, how you doing?
We're breezing through the agenda, Doug.
I have
We're already on item number 5.
have Einstein's theory about how time passes when you've got a meeting that's starting in 20 minutes and it's only a 5-minute drive, but somehow you're 7 minutes late.
Well, Doug, why don't you, we already went around, why don't you introduce yourself to the members who we probably haven't met yet?
Hi, I'm Doug Jones. I've lived in town for 35 years. I've served as an elected or appointed official since 1999 on the RTM building committees. I'm a justice of the peace, which is kind of fun. And I don't know, I guess I'm not a tenant, I'm not a landlord. But
Got those covered.
maybe I have a little bit of institutional knowledge that might be useful, I don't know.
Perfect. All right, well, Doug, just so you know, we adopted the meeting schedule with the exception that June 11th is actually going to be June 20th,
Okay,
just so you know.
thank you.
I'll send that out to everyone.
If you want to write it down. It's the
I'm
next
about to
page.
do that, Thank you very much.
All right, so item number 5 on our. Item number 5 on our agenda to receive an update on case number 2024-01, which is our inaugural case, Torres versus Butler.
I'm pleased to report that the parties have settled their dispute and
Perfect.
the complainant has withdrawn his complaint.
That's great news.
That is one matter down.
System working as it should. Yeah. All right, new business. Well, actually, open discussion of next steps. Sorry, that's item number 6.
The only thing I had under that, Mr. Chair, is we talked about having, with the assistance of the state legal aid attorney, who's an expert in this particular area of tenant landlord law, to provide an orientation program. I have not reached out to him. The session just ended, but I will do that and determine his availability and perhaps suggest unless there's a suggestion, another suggestion that we maybe do it on a date that we already have a meeting scheduled.
That'd be great.
Provided there isn't a hearing scheduled for that time.
Yeah, if we have or if we could just, we have a 7 o'clock start, but we start at 6 for the orientation.
Correct.
So
Well, call me at 20 minutes of 7.
Mark, one question I did have, since I'm looking at it on the dates here. Give the location as Old Town Hall Building, second floor, which is where we are obviously right now. Is this gonna be our regular location?
I think so.
Okay,
I think so. I think there is a meeting in the first floor conference room Sullivan at 5 or 6 that may, on the second Thursday. Thursdays are a little rare. That's why I picked a Thursday. It worked out okay in terms of meeting space, but in case they run long or we're early, that's an issue. So,
these accommodations are fine, I think, so happy either way.
not the most attractive space, but.
Okay, any other open discussion as to next steps for our commission? The 20th.
20th.
I've got 20. Jesus, thanks.
Just a general question, whenever there is a hearing or a case, will we get any documentation or details about it ahead of time before the meeting? Or
That would be my intent, yes, yeah, so I have not disseminated that yet. I think with the hearing notice, I'll provide that information, the complaint, and give the respondent an opportunity to provide whatever documentation needed. Of course, they'll do it at the hearing, so. But, you'll at least have the complaint beforehand, know what it's all about.
We won't be flying blind, in other words, so.
Okay, that's useful.
Yeah, we talked about developing some procedures and ground rules where I think maybe we just get into it a little bit, and then as things go, maybe that'll inform the process a little bit. We don't have the staff capacity of a New Haven or Stanford where they have full-time staff dedicated to this function.
Well, we might see how it goes first, do a few of these hearings, see what works and what doesn't, before we develop some rules associated with it, just so we're not boxing ourselves in ahead of time with something that might not be feasible.
And during the hearing, you can always ask any of the two parties to provide more information, documents as needed.
Yeah, I'll defer to the chair to run the meeting and make sure that both parties have an opportunity to be heard. They have to be sworn in, provide testimony, opportunity to examine and cross-examine witnesses, present evidence for consideration.
And if they don't have documentation, I think it's my perspective that sometimes documentation doesn't exist, right? There's an issue that they say exists, you don't necessarily have a photo for it or, an estimate from a contractor or something like that. That just goes, I think, to the weight of the evidence that we can, consider before us. Somebody's telling us something versus seeing it, perceive. It might very well be that there's multiple witnesses that can tell us, yeah, it smells like gas in, the apartment all the time. We can't tell that from a picture or, there's no reading that we have. We just have to rely on people saying, what the information is. We just have to go with what the weight of the evidence is based on, how credible we view the witnesses. So that's my intention, at least. I'm not going to try to hold anybody up because they don't have any paperwork to support something. But obviously, if they do, even better for us to, help consider their claims. But we can always ask for more information if they maybe reference something. Oh, yes, I had a contractor come in, pest control come in to take care of the rodent problem, for example. Okay, well, do you have documentation of that? Because your tenant's saying that it never happened. So, let us know. That's part of why I'm saying maybe we want to get into a few of these things first before we, have some sort of procedures in mind.
Yeah, I imagine it will be a learning process in a way.
Yeah.
The first few months.
It already has been.
How does a tenant or a landlord find out about the Fair Rent Commission? Is it advertised, social, at the senior center, you have the social service, Julie. Do they get forms or anything to help the seniors?
I think this departments are certainly aware of it.
They are aware of
I
it.
believe landlords are becoming aware of it. We haven't done any direct correspondence to property owners or landlords in town yet, but I think that will come.
Yeah.
We do have information posted on our website, and people aren't shy about calling if they have a question about,
Good.
a rent that seems a little out of
little.
whack. So we've gotten a fair number of inquiries and 3 complaints thus far. Been around for like a couple months now. So.
And the process is working as it should, you answer questions that hopefully filter some things out now that information's provided. Some complaints result from that, but those filter out through mediation or, other resolution process. And sometimes, unfortunately, we get complaints. We have to deal with it. So hopefully it's only the matters that have intractable parties or serious issues that, we're going to be obviously dedicating our time to helping resolve.
So do you envision that the complaints will be normally around renewal, that is aggressive increase in the rent, or repairs, maintenance that's not done or not done properly? Because you don't imagine that someone just signed the lease yesterday, a new lease, and then come a complaint about, I just signed the lease, but it's.
All 3 of the complaints we've received so far have been primarily about the rent increase.
Around renewals, yeah.
And one also had a complaint regarding the condition of the unit and whether or not, it met housing code. So that was referred to the health department for investigation. And that was worked out because the issue that the complainant was alleging dealt with a window that was leaking. And so he wanted the window to be repaired. So the landlord agreed to repair the window.
Right. Yeah, and our ordinance here, it's not just limited to excessive rental charges, but also violations of rental code too, or of housing codes too. So it could be, a lot of the other issues that our ordinance talks about here, repairs, taxes, misrepresentations about the size of the unit or furniture. You sign your contract, you get in there, you realize this is half the space than what I bargained for. So there's a lot, I think, to potentially cover, and I'm sure these complaints will come in all shapes and sizes.
Yes.
And the goal is always to try to make the reconciliation first.
Right.
Notify the landlord if they can resolve the issue first.
Yeah, my usually when we get the initial inquiry or complaint, I will ask whether or not they've spoken to their landlord and raised this concern. And if they have, then we can talk through the complaint process. And usually, once I receive a complaint, then I will notify both parties that I've received your complaint, notify the landlord that we do have a complaint, give some indication as to what the complaint is about. Also indicate that it's unlawful for them to take retaliatory action against the complainant for bringing this issue up. And also remind the tenant it's their obligation to pay the rent as agreed. They don't have to necessarily pay an increase in the rent if that's what they're disputing, but they do have to pay the last agreed upon rent in a timely fashion. Otherwise, they're subject to potentially a claim for non-payment. So we do notify both parties, give them some indication of what the process entails. I provide them a copy of the ordinance, which lays out the powers of this commission and, a little bit more about the procedures that you go through and the criteria that you'll have to consider as part of the evidentiary hearing process. And then, remind them that, until we have a hearing scheduled, they're certainly free to work it out. And if I can be of help, please work it out. I'm available for their use. So in most of the instances, I think with that little nudging, the parties have been able to come to some agreement. And, they're usually, as you would expect, compromising things. So again, that's, I think, indicative of the process working as was intended. One of the cases that we'll talk about in a minute may not fall in that category because the parties do seem to be pretty far apart and have completely different ideas of what the circumstances are. And so it may not lend itself to a quick and speedy resolution.
And do we envision that part of our work here? I'm not sure if this will ever happen, that you get a complaint from the other side, from the landlord, or we're not replacing in any way the eviction process. So the landlord complain, oh,
No, we're not.
and get my rent on time, or.
Nope. Yeah, they have their own process to.
Right, you have your normal court process for that through housing court.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's not, I don't think that's in your purview.
Mhm.
So.
It's a great question though, because they just opened up eviction court in LA this February after 4 years of no cases.
Right.
And there's still no evictions actually taking place. So, don't want to be a landlord in LA.
No, it's happening in Connecticut. I mean, I do a fair amount of, so I'm a lawyer. I do a fair amount of, I'm a litigator. I do a fair amount of pro bono litigation, mainly involving housing disputes. And we work on behalf of the Connecticut Veterans Legal Center to represent oftentimes veterans who are facing eviction. And tell you that they're evicting people, that's for sure. And that process is ongoing in Connecticut, at least. And I mean, there's a real problem sometimes with a lack of housing, affordable housing in the state, and people who are facing eviction trying to find alternate housing. So I can tell you that evictions are definitely happening here too. And I mean, those remedies are available. You are a landlord. You have to pay a mortgage on the property potentially, or insurance if you're.
Your taxes.
Yeah, your taxes, and if you don't have the money to cover that, then you find somebody who can help you at least cover those things. If not, bring the income in that you deserve. So that's we're getting philosophical.
Housing court is the last remedy for a landlord.
It is.
You pretty much have to be desperate.
Yeah, it's difficult too. They don't make it easy.
No, they're not fans of.
Yeah, every period and comma correct. I can tell you that.
I've been twice.
Yeah.
And I was late and I was treated politely and there was never a major issue. It was just legitimate. But I was told, don't ever go to housing court.
You're right.
There's no reason, just work it out.
And they work in the mediation process in housing court too. You can't get a hearing in housing court without seeing somebody ahead of time who will lean on you to resolve whatever dispute you have, to the extent that's possible. Most recent case I had was a sister evicting another sister from a property. So you can imagine there's not just landlord-tenant dynamic, but there's a familial dynamic too, and no mediator was going to cut through that. So
I had a meeting today with a tenant who's one of my favorites of all time. And his lease was up and he's in a building where people need to grow. And I'm contractually obligated to provide adjacent space when it becomes available. So if you don't have an option to extend your term, when your term's over, you've got to leave.
Right.
I'm negligent by not delivering that space. And so now that party goes after me.
Right.
Well, it's not litigious, but the reason he can't go is he bought a building and the tenant won't leave.
Right. Yeah.
So he's an operator. He's not a landlord. He's a wonderful businessman. And he says, Jim, you're going to have to help me. So I said, well, I'll help you. I'll give you a notice to quit. And then you just copy that and put your name on it as a landlord and your tenant's name on it and change the references and serve the person and get your lawyers going through the. So he's like, oh, thank you. And I mean, I had to serve him an official eviction notice and I'm not prosecuting the guy.
Right.
It never really comes to that. And he's in for a huge learning curve because this tenant's, not even answering the phone.
Yeah.
It's been 6 months.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, it can be the other side, but like you say, your remedies are there, and unless you're in dire straits, you can wait it out, survive.
All right. I think we're on agenda number 7 now, the new business. So case 2024-02, the Foco versus Jones Street residential.
Yes, and this should be in the process of being withdrawn. I've spoken to both parties. They acknowledge they have a resolution. They're reading through the terms to make sure they fully understand the tenant is. Make sure they fully understand it before they withdraw. But subject, I guess there's always the possibility that it isn't what they thought it would be. So if need be, I may have to put that on the hearing date on the 20th, but I
Can
don't
you
expect it.
briefly, Mark, just recap what the issues are?
Yeah, this
Getting into the whole.
This is a pure and simple. We have an existing tenant. They received a notice of a rent increase. They thought the rent increase was excessive and certainly more than what they can pay. It's an elderly couple. They live in a newer apartment building. And they're happy to stay there, but they really aren't a fixed income, so they can't afford a 20% increase in rent. I spoke to the property manager and suggested, under the circumstances, maybe they try to work things out. Happily, I believe they have, and they came to a compromise, but until I get a formal withdrawal of the complaint, it's still pending. And so I just sent the parties, I sent the elderly couple and their daughter a note tonight saying, hey, I haven't yet received notice of withdrawal. Please let me know where you are in with this case. And so hopefully I'll hear back from them shortly.
Now, I kind of envision this commission working sort of the stream of business comes in kind of similar to the Board of Assessment Appeals, maybe. And do we have resources that can like pull comps?
Well,
To say, maybe.
there is, you can, we do have some funding set aside to do some kind of rent market analysis. If you want, we've done some informal surveys in the past, just by calling up and saying, what are you charging for apartments, that type of thing.
Right, yeah.
But, a lot of it will depend somewhat on the evidence you hear at the hearing. So both sides have the opportunity to present their side of the story and their case as they see fit. And I'm sure you're gonna get
to do that too.
some of the folks may have more resources at their disposal, and they may provide a lot of information to back up their claim that what they're charging in the way of rent is perfectly reasonable and is in line with current market conditions. And you're just gonna have to, again, to the chair's statement earlier, weigh that credibility of the evidence that you've received and witness testimony, and then make a decision based on your best judgment and common sense. But, we could do an analysis, but those things, you'll have to be updated fairly regularly.
And it costs money.
Conditions change, yeah.
All right, well, I think that brings us to perhaps the one that we will be hearing next month, case number 2024-03. Darling versus Redwood Capital Partners.
Yeah, this just came in. It's a small apartment building, 4 units. Was recently purchased by an out-of-state investment group. Did some work to the property. Is looking to reposition the asset and obviously the rents for those units. The complainant indicates that her unit is not comparable to other units within the complex for which they're charging a lot more and what they're asking her to pay. It hasn't taken effect. I think they were providing early notice come September that the rent would increase. And again, it's a fairly substantial increase, so she filed a complaint. There's some back and forth in terms of who said what and did what. So we'll sort all that out. But I've spoken to both parties and indicated I would inform the commission of their complaint, and then we'll move ahead and schedule a hearing. And that might jumpstart further conversations between the parties, and they can work something out, or maybe not. So you may have some business to attend to after all on the 20th of June.
We'll see if they want to be our inaugural guinea pig here.
Yeah, well, no, I have the sense that this commission puts a little oomph
Yeah,
behind having the parties get together and find an arrangement, an agreement that can both live with. Because I would.
I certainly haven't disabused anyone of that notion, you know.
In this process.
So you really want somebody else to work this out, or you want to work it out yourselves, you know, so. And that works both ways. I've had, the first complaint we had, actually, the rent that was being charged, that was being complained about is actually a fairly reasonable rent. He was looking at a fairly big increase year over year, but he was paying a below market rent for the unit that he was complaining about. His argument was that it's also a substandard unit in terms of condition. So he had a housing code issue or complaint with that, which I had to help, you know, anything that comes in that alleges there is some housing code violation, I will refer that immediately to the health department for an investigation. I don't think they found anything completely out of line there, based on my conversation with the deputy director over there. But, you know, I think again, that process helped bring the parties together and come to some agreement. And part of it was talking to the tenant and saying, hey, look, I know this is a big increase. And perhaps you can work something out where it's a smaller increase. And maybe that it's a stepped, you know, where 6 months you pay this, and then 6 months later you pay a little bit more. Maybe that'll work out. And that's what they ended up doing. But, you know, it's trying to get both parties to talk through these issues rather than bring it to this board. If they can, if not, you know, I've said, hey, you're free to take your chances, make your case, let the chips fall where
I'm
they.
happy to hear the evidence.
Right.
Okay,
As you do that, I know it's always a challenge to define what's fair. It's very difficult to define what's fair or to quantify what's fairness. But as we take this challenge, will you in any way consider the income of the tenant? Do we take in consideration the ability to pay, so to speak?
I think it is. Is it in there, Tom?
I'm looking. Following circumstances are applicable. The Commission shall consider such the following circumstances as are applicable, the type of accommodation. Rents charged for the same number of rooms and other housing accommodations, sanitary conditions, number of bathtubs, showers, services, furniture, furnishings, size of the number of bedrooms, repairs necessary, amount of taxes, in compliance with ordinances of the town or the state, income of the petitioner and availability of accommodations. So that's item number 9. That's within our purview to consider.
I mean, we did, on the RTM, we did the senior and disabled tax relief several times. More than once, it would come up that an elderly parent had substantial real property, but had not a lot of income. And we had some RTM members screaming about how millionaires were getting tax relief.
Right.
Or might have. I think it was finally worked out at there's a cap somewhere around 675,000, something like that, which is allowable in real property because it's not real, it's not fungible. I mean, not immediately, but
Tom, I
Yes,
think the seniors are under a different protection too, under the fair market rental.
mhm.
So it would be about ages too, like you say, an elderly couple came and they got to move in under fair housing.
Yeah, that is one of the statutes that's referenced here too, is 47A23C.
That's under there. That's
Yeah.
what I used when, yeah.
Yep.
So I guess the age is senior, you gotta consider that.
Yeah, and the fact, and one of the other issues, one of the complaints dealt with a unit that was an affordable unit. So it was a deed restricted affordable rental unit. That's not to say that somebody still can't file a fair rent complaint. They could be in compliance with the fair market rent. But they still could have a basis for a complaint before this commission. And one of the issues was that, you know, not surprisingly, the investor landlord would try to maximize the rent being paid. That could amount to a fairly substantial increase year over year, and that's what in fact happened. So they were technically in compliance with our deed restriction. It was a compliant rent, but the increase was substantial. And I think eventually, because of the age and the
Yeah,
income,
that does.
I think they came to an understanding that, you know, maybe we could cut this in half. We still get a little bit more than what we had before, and that's within the ability of the tenant to pay.
Well, these apartments going up around Fairfield, like my apartment, 10 apartments are under the fair housing. Now, is there years they have on that, or 20 years, or
40 years.
how many years?
40.
40 years you got.
Yeah.
I'm amazed,
Yeah.
40 years.
It's a requirement, you know,
Okay,
be nice to have it more permanent than
Yeah.
that, but
Perpetuity.
but 40 years
40 years is.
Not bad.
was what they got, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, most, you hear 20 years,
Mhm.
or 15 even, yeah, 40.
I guess we might reach a point, I don't know if we might reach that point that when we look at the alternatives available to the tenant, when we look at the comparables, the comparables, are we limiting ourselves to the town of Fairfield market? Because you know, every town is completely different, what's affordable here. Are we limiting ourselves to the town of Fairfield? Or we can consider, okay, that tenant may have a good option somewhere else in Stratford, let's say, and there is no reason why they cannot leave. Or we're always limiting ourselves to the town. I don't know if we can answer this now, but.
No, I think that's something that we're gonna have to see how it comes. I mean, if you live right on the Fairfield Easton line and there's a house across the street that is comparable in every way, you know, I wouldn't be opposed to, I mean, obviously you're gonna have a different mill rate, you know, and different taxes that are associated with that property. Different reasons why the property in Fairfield, the rent's probably priced the way it is in Fairfield versus what it would be in Easton, for example. But that factor aside, I wouldn't be opposed, knowing that's not a one-for-one comparison, but I think we kind of have to see how it comes in.
School differential then too, so it gets silly.
If you have kids in the school system, that might be a big.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a case by case, I guess, but we're not limiting ourselves to the town of Fairfield.
I
Case by case.
I'm agnostic as to the evidence that comes in at this point.
Mhm.
And if you want to compare what's going on in Fairfield with what's going on in Norwich, you can bring that information. I might not put a lot of weight on it at all, you know, but you can bring that information if you want.
If you want to have fun, go to the Board of Assessment Appeals and listen to those.
Yeah, right.
What zip code is that?
Yeah, right.
That's all I have for.
Okay.
So.
Anybody else? Carl, you've been quiet up there. Anything else from you?
Oh, no, I'm good. Everything makes sense.
Okay. All right. Well, I will take a motion to adjourn. Anybody has one?
So moved.
Any seconds? Second. All in favor?
I.
Any opposed? No? All right. See you guys on June 20th.
Bye, everyone.
Let's go Red Sox.